All right, we are going live and we have a live interview today. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Bree to join us. We're talking Runner's Dystonia. Williamson, who joined us for a program for Runner's Dystonia and then keeps progressing. It's so awesome. So Bree, I just sent you an invite, but you can also ask to join our live today. So every now and then, maybe a couple of times a month, we get to do a live interview with somebody who's completed a program with us. And it's one of my favorite things. And particularly on this topic, I think it's really important to share some of what's been helpful in runner's dystonia because it's rare. And so there's not a lot of research about it. And there's a few things out there. And a lot of folks really get discouraged that they can't get better. And so to hear from somebody like Bree, and Bree, I'm going to try inviting you again here. To hear from somebody like Bree, hear her story, what she learned in therapy from PT, OT, psychology, as well as, let me see, I keep inviting you here. Let me see if this works. As well as what she keeps doing to keep going. So I think that's one of the most important things too. When we work with folks, maybe for a month or so, it's just the start of a journey, and so it's a lot of us figuring out things. And you made it, Bree.
Hello.
Hey, hi. Oh, it's good to see your face.
It's good to see you too.
I was like, really? I just want to hang out with Bree.
I'd rather be on the beach right now.
Although it's pretty rainy and cold. I mean, probably not as cold as it is where
No.
you are, but yay. So I was just kind of introducing you and particularly talking about how when we work with somebody, it's just kind of the start of things. And I know because I've been like watching you keep adding on mileage and things like that at home that like it keeps going, which is so exciting. But I actually had folks reach out to me before we did this live, um, you know, with other folks with runner's dystonia, really wanting to hear your story, really wanting to kind of know the process. As you know, the process of getting diagnosed and trying to understand what's happening in your body when you're running it's a tough process. So I would love to start there and hear from you, however little or as much as you want to share
Yeah.
about your story.
Yeah. So I feel really fortunate because I feel like I got a lot of answers really quickly and had a lot of the right people in my corner right away. But my story with dystonia actually started in January of 2023. So I had just come off of my best racing season in the summer and fall. I kept progressively getting faster and faster and was just really excited about what was to come. And I started noticing in January of 23 that running was starting to feel hard for me. I wasn't hitting the paces that I was used to running. It just was feeling hard. And I kept telling myself, oh, you're tired, you're stressed, you're tired of winter, you're tired of the treadmill. As soon as some of these things will let up, running will get better again and you'll get back to where you were and you'll continue progressing. And it was in February that I was on vacation with my husband and we were running together and I took off a little bit towards the end. And when we finished our run, he was like, what are you doing with your leg? I have never seen you run like that. Like it is so bizarre. And he kept telling me, you look like Phoebe from Friends. Like I've never seen you do that. And he said, you need to get to a PT and get your form fixed or you're going to end up hurting yourself trying to run like that. So I contacted my PT and just said, hey, I developed this weird gait. I need you to fix me. I have some bad habits and then I think we're going to be good. And he actually referred me to one of his colleagues and said, if it's form, if it's gait, we should have you do a 3D gait analysis. And kind of figure out what's going on so that we can troubleshoot from there. And so I met with Kristen, my PT, for the first time, and we did the gait analysis, and she took all the little sticky pads off and said, you know, Bree, I can't diagnose you, but this looks like it's presenting as dystonia. And I really think that you need to see a neurologist, and more specifically a movement disorder specialist, to kind of rule out some other things and to confirm one way or another. But I don't know that we should meet until we have an idea of what we're working with here. And so she gave me a couple names. She was my biggest advocate in this whole process. But she gave me some names and some neurologists to see, and we were able to work some magic so that I could be seen rather quickly. So I went into the neurologist saying, I'm being told that this could possibly be dystonia. I don't know. And so he did a bunch of tests in the appointment, and then we had a number of MRIs like most people have. It's like the ruling out of all the scary things, and a couple EMGs. And basically, I was left with a diagnosis in a voicemail of this: you have dystonia, and basically, good luck. You can try PT, you can try Botox, but good luck to you. And really left with no direction of what to do next, whether they wanted to see me, whether I should run or not. And so that's kind of how it started for me.
Yeah. Well, and really, really likely that you have access to some of those specialists too,
Yeah,
because I think a lot of people go to multiple doctors and they don't even know what dystonia is or runner's
right.
dystonia is. So
Yeah, I feel
that's
really grateful that Kristen was able to acknowledge that and kind of point me in the direction so early on.
what a five-star PT right
Yes,
there.
yes, very
Five
much
star.
so.
So then what happened from there? You got this diagnosis, but no real direction.
Yeah, so I mean, it's weird when you have this diagnosis and you don't have any pain and you don't have any understanding of when things are going to change. And so at that point in time, I was encouraged to stop running because it was, you know, this thought of we don't want to keep reinforcing these patterns that we don't think are helpful to you. But we don't know when you're going to start running again. And that was really hard for me. Like I've had injuries before, and they say, okay, you're out for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, but to be able to just stop running and we don't know when you get to start running again, that was a really hard message for me. And so I know Kristen actually started reaching out to you, Julie, of like, what do I do with her? I'm not really sure. And you were so gracious. And so essentially we tried to start mimicking some of the things that we were seeing on Reactive's Instagram page. I know she was getting ideas from you on different things to try with me. We laughed a lot. We did a lot of silly things and looked really crazy. I also was contacted by a sports psychologist to kind of work through the grief of not being able to run and kind of the loss that came with that. So I felt like we were getting a psychology component of this process while also doing the PT. We were meeting 3 times a week. So we really were trying to do like this immersive process, almost like reactive. And then we just got to this point where we felt like we were running out of things to try, and she just said, if you could make reactive work, if I were you, I would give it a shot, and I would go for it. And so I did. But I mean, we tried at home for a while.
Yeah, and I mean, and honestly, I remember Kristen reaching out, and I was like sending her messages,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Try this, try this."
Yeah.
Um, she was phenomenal. She's
Yeah.
phenomenal, and I think there's a lot of PTs out there that are really willing to try and
Yeah.
to learn, and I think it can get like a very good like start to
Yeah.
things for sure. So how did you end up kind of making that decision? Because we're not in your backyard,
Right,
right?
right, right. I mean, I had a lot of questions and concerns. And there was another person that I can call a friend now that we've kind of met through Dystonia, and we talked with a couple people who had gone through the program before and wanted to hear, their stories. And, some of the stories I heard weren't all that positive as far as outcomes go, but the positivity and the mindset was something that really stuck with me, and really left an impression on me. Um, I was really afraid of one, taking the time away from my family because I have three kids. I have a husband who works full time and is in school, and we have a lot going on. I was really nervous about taking the time away from work and spending the money. That all of that felt very scary, and it felt like, what if I put everything into this and it doesn't work? I'm going to feel really bad that I've like taken this time away and spent all this money. And my husband basically was just like, but what if it does? Like, what if it does work? Like, I was falling and tripping when I was walking. And, people were telling me, you're too young to be a fall risk when you're walking. And so it just kind of came to this point where it was like, we have to try. If it doesn't work, I'm not in a worse situation. And if it does, it could have a really meaningful impact on my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I'm glad you said that about kind of tripping and falling, because I think what happened for you does happen to folks with runner's dystonia, where it's not just running, it might happen in walking, right? So I wonder if you could describe, I know I always do this with my hand as like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what happens to a person's foot, but like describe what was actually happening with running and walking for you.
Yeah, so when I was walking, originally it kind of started almost like a scuff. It was like my foot wanted to like do this like flipper thing. And it would just kind of be a scuff and feel like my foot was um kind of like tripping over itself, or like it couldn't fully pick itself up to get to the next step. And so it would result it I would try like flip-flops, and those were terrible, and I'd try flat shoes, and I would try all these different things, but essentially like I would just like trip, and I would, usually go flying forward and catch myself. I only had one time where I truly, truly fell, but it was always that constant fear of falling. And then when I was running, it was more almost at my hip or my knee, where we call it like my whip it leg or my skip it leg, because it just like was such an aggressive movement
Mm-hmm.
and so big. It felt like the faster I went, the more aggressive the movement became.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I know I shared a little like video of you today
Yeah.
too. So if people were curious, like that's what it looked like. And somebody even asked here too, let me pull up to this question here. Was your dystonia, did it have a more favorable outcome because she got a diagnosis and treatment very quickly? I think that really helped, right? Because we're talking less than a year in to the dystonia development, and you're getting some answers. You're getting actually some treatment right away with your PT at home. And then you came to see us within like 10 months
September. Yeah.
in September. Yeah. So 9 months of being of the onset. And honestly, yeah, that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think it's a pretty long process for people to get diagnosed. So that is
Yeah.
pretty fast. And if we think of dystonia as this neuroplasticity kind of gone awry, these patterns being laid down in your brain, the longer you're practicing them, the harder they are to break,
Yeah.
right? And most folks that I've seen with runner's dystonia, it's been going on for a year or two.
Yeah.
Um, Now, most runners I know don't like stopping running, myself included. So
Right.
they keep running
Yeah.
with that pattern. But I'll say I've also worked with other folks with dystonia who've had it for 12 years and have also had a favorable outcome. There's not a big randomized controlled trial on this stuff. It's so
Yeah.
rare. So that was a great question. So this was affecting your walking. It was affecting your running. And you came out, and actually you set up kind of a unique program, I thought, because you came out during the week and you went home for like a long weekend or the weekend, right?
Yeah, I mean, Reactive was super flexible with my schedule. And so we made the appointments so that I took a 7 a.m. flight every Monday morning, which was 5 a.m. your time. And then my appointments started on Monday afternoons, and then were Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then I had appointments Thursday mornings and flew home Thursday nights, and usually got home at 10 p.m. on Thursdays so that I could at least be home Friday through Sunday with my family.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so creative on your part. And I know that we'll do that. Like people are working, they're doing other
Yeah.
things. We'll try to work around that because we schedule in advance. Um, you also like had major life changes. You were buying a house and things like that. I was like, oh my gosh, but you made it work. You made the
Yes.
schedule work.
Yes, we did.
Um, and I think sometimes folks ask us like, how do you do that and have a life? Well, I think part of it is actually to do it and be involved in your life, right?
Yeah.
And incorporate it into your life. Somebody else is asking about medication. And when you first met with that doctor who was kind of like, oh, you know, that's it. Did they prescribe medication for you or did you trial any medication?
I didn't. They were pretty wishy-washy for me. So
Mm,
again, this was in a voicemail, and they said,
right.
you could try Botox injections in your leg to make the muscle atrophy, but we're actually kind of concerned that it may make it more difficult for you to walk since it's already being challenged. So I felt like they like put something out there, but then took it back and said, you could try
Mm,
this, but we don't know if it's a good idea. There was never any message of medication. But for me, it felt like I wanted to get at kind of the root cause and the issue and not just medicate. I think there's a place for that, but I wanted to get more of like what's causing this and why is it happening?
hmm Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of folks do go through trials of
Yeah.
medication or Botox as well. And unfortunately, especially with the focal dystonias like runner's dystonia, where it's just in the leg, or a hand dystonia, those just aren't as beneficial.
Right.
And so you were like ready to make the brain changes,
Yeah.
it sounds like.
Well, and
Uh,
Botox also just felt even more expensive than just going out to California because of how often you have to keep up with it. And so it felt like let's just address the bigger problem rather than continuing to shell out money for something that they're not sure will work either.
mhm. And then end up as a runner with a weak leg.
Right. Right. Right.
not not as helpful. Okay, so you came out, and I wonder if you can maybe share some of your favorite parts of the program, and particularly you worked with each of the disciplines
Mhm.
in our team, like maybe something you kind of learned from each person.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was so fun. I mean, when you are going to 2 or 3 appointments a day that are an hour or longer, like my brain and my body were tired from everything. Like we were trying to reprogram my brain and it's exhausting. And so to make it fun, that was really important. I think the thing that I loved most about the team is I could tell that they were coordinating and integrating their approach to working with me. And I can give you examples of that. When um, I went into the psychology component or the psychotherapy component thinking, oh, you have to teach me how to manage stress because once I figure out how to manage stress, like this is going to help me in my rehab back. And really, it became more about addressing perfectionism and how my desire and striving to be perfect, creates stress and leads to other areas of my life. And that bled into um, yoga therapy, which I was not excited about at all. I was like, I'm going to be spending 60 minutes one on one. Like, typically, if I'm in yoga and I don't want to do a move, I skip it. But I can't do that when it's one-on-one. But I remember at one point asking the yoga therapist, like, how come you don't correct me in my posture, so that so I'm doing this correctly? And she was like, because Bree, the goal is not for you to be this perfect yoga student. The goal is for you to connect your body and your breath and to give your body what it needs on that day. And I was like, oh, you've been talking to my therapist about perfectionism. And so I could just see the coordination. And then even in PT, everything was so creative of this is why we're doing this and why we're trying this. This is why we're playing with pool noodles or why we're running with ribbons and playing these light games or adding external stimuli to your leg. Like, here's what we're doing. But then even towards the end of the program, it was giving me that autonomy of, okay, what do you want to do today? We're giving you some choice. And that was really scary for me because I just want to be told what to do so that I can do it right, because it goes back to that perfectionism. And it was like, no, you can't be wrong. Like, let's just have you choose some of these activities that serve your body. And then in OT, we spent a lot of time on breath work and stress management and playing with fidgets and addressing sensory inputs. And I've really taken that to heart too. One of my New Year's resolutions for 2024 is take more baths. And truly just to slow down. And I have.
You
Um,
have.
I'm taking more baths, and that's really good just for my nervous system and just to slow down, because we live in such a hustle culture that has been so good for me that I really appreciated every component that I had in my program.
Yeah. Oh, and I know I was like so lucky to be in on the team, and like because we use these channels to communicate. It's like every single session it was like, "Oh, we discovered this today.
Yeah,
Oh, let's use this from OT into PT,"
yeah,
and kind of bringing all those pieces together.
and I felt that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's kind of magical to I learned so much from our other
Yeah,
people on our team, and it really brings pieces together that I would not have thought of. Like as a physical therapist, I'm not always thinking of perfectionism,
yeah,
right?
right,
So
right.
even though that's my own struggle as well. Um, yeah, that's just so brilliant. And what were, we kind of talked about this pie chart, right? With like sensory and autonomic, and you mentioned some of those pieces. What do you notice? What did you kind of learn in the program about some of those different pieces? And I'm curious, like what you're still like incorporating now.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of people reach out to me and ask me, like, what things did you do that were most helpful that I could try? And it's so hard to answer that question because it really felt like it was so customized to me and how my body was responding. But for me, a lot of the stuff that we did in physical therapy was bringing awareness to the right side of my body. I felt like I almost lacked awareness from my glute all the way down to my foot. And so doing different things, whether it was taping a stuffed animal to my leg or using tape or doing this little shock, the hyper ice shocker thing that just made me aware of where my calf was, or any type of rubber band at my ankle or weight that provided like a here's where your foot is in space. Those things were really, really helpful for me. And then also just glute activation exercises. That was also a really important part to me that I didn't realize I would need that would help. And so, one of the things that we did in occupational therapy that was really good for me was we made a jar and we put all of the activities that I had done over the 4 weeks in this jar. And then I was just encouraged to take 3 exercises and do those, for a week. And then the next week, take 3 new exercises and do those exercises for the week. That way, I have some type of structure, which I appreciate, but still the variability of doing something different for my brain. The glute activation is something that I've been doing most days because I'm realizing how beneficial that is for me. And then it's just picking a couple activities from the jar. A lot of them, I tend to like the ones that have a rubber band or some type of band at my ankle that just kind of reinforces where my foot is in space.
Mhm. Yeah, I can remember working with you and being on you're on the treadmill and you're like, I really just like almost don't feel my legs.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a frank like loss of sensation,
Yeah.
but it was just like where it was in space. And our team got so creative. We had the like video projecting your video
So cool.
feedback, which was so cool. I've never done that before, and I was like, I learned something new. So yeah, and you're right, so individualized. Not everybody has that same sensory
Right.
kind of experience with their leg. So you're right. It's not like a one size fits all kind of do these 10 things and
Right.
you'll get better.
Right.
And in fact, the more variable, the better, which is why I
Yep.
love the jar. That was
Yeah.
like another really brilliant idea. Now, somebody else asked about how often you were running. And so I wonder, Bree, before this all happened and you took a break from running, what was your mileage like?
So before dystonia, I was probably averaging between 50 to 70 miles a week, depending on where I was in a training cycle. I may have backed off a little bit in the winter, just when there's not as much racing going on. I was still running, even when I was running what I call wonky, my wonky leg, I was still running about 50 miles a week. It just was slower and harder. And then when I stopped for probably 4 months, where I was then just biking and using the Peloton. And we finally came to a point where we felt like incorporating a little bit of running was just good for my mental
Mm-hmm.
health. And so we incorporated a little bit back in, but it was only a couple times per week. And then I started running again more while I was out in California, just because I needed something else to do for myself
Mm-hmm.
since I was by myself. And now I'm back up to over 50 miles a week again. And so that's kind of been the progression from pre, during, and where I am now.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. I was like, I see you running. I see the mileage going up. That's really
Yeah.
exciting too. And what somebody else is asking, how often do you perform those? So like if you're drawing your three different exercises,
Yeah.
which may or may not look like an exercise. I know some of them,
Yeah.
some of them are interesting things to do. Are you doing those like every day?
I'm trying to. It depends on, whether I'm traveling and what my schedule looks like. The glute activation, I'm actually bringing my bands with me when I travel. I mean, though that is like a staple pre-run activity for me, where I just realized, like in the past, if I had time, if it was stretch or do an extra mile, I would always take the extra mile. And
Mm,
now I know I need to prioritize. If it means cutting a mile, I need to do the pre uh, activation
mm,
exercise. And then the PT exercises, I try to do just a couple, either one before my run or after my run, just to reinforce the movements. But I only do it once per day, and it's usually either before or after my run while I'm still in workout clothes. But there are some activities that I can do at my desk while I'm standing, and it's really easy for me to do, and nobody knows I'm actually doing exercises. So there's some of those that I can sneak in my day that's easier.
yeah, that's great. That's great. And now people want your full glute routine here.
Clamshells, clamshells, clamshells with
Yeah,
a
it's so
band.
funny. I don't think your glute activation routine is much different from mine. I even like when I ran the Chicago Marathon, I brought my black band with me because I'm like, it's gonna be cold. I need to activate my glutes before I start my marathon.
Yeah. And one of the things I love is the team gave me, like, in my discharge paperwork, they gave me links to everything that we had used and everything that I had liked in my therapy. So it was like, we use these thicker bands. Here's the link on Amazon. We use these stretchy bands. Here's the link on Amazon. So I had links to then purchase what I knew I really liked, so that I would have at home and I knew it worked for me.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that I often think about, because, I think a lot of runners are doing strengthening and things like that all of the time. I think that the combo of strength with sensory training and actually recognizing, because I know for you, when we put a band on you,
Yeah.
it's like more sensory and
Yeah.
proprioceptive input right away. And so that is like one of the pieces
Yeah.
where it's not just that we're strengthening the muscle,
Right.
but really improving the proprioceptive input to the
Yes.
whole leg.
Yes, and that's why those glute exercises I'm doing before runs, because it's just like that check of like, as soon as the band goes around my feet, I'm stepping on it. I'm like, there's my feet. I know where they are. I can feel them. I feel the resistance, and it's just the perfect warm up for me before I run.
Yeah. Now, and there's lots of questions. I love this. I'm so thankful for folks asking questions. But one person is asking, where do you feel you are in your recovery? Like what percent recovered?
Um, it's hard to know how to answer that. When I first left, I felt like I left California being like, I feel like I'm like 80% of the way there. I felt like I
Mm,
really made good progress. The last few group runs that I've done with people, they look at me running from behind who know what I've been through and have said, I would never know that you have dystonia. I just don't even see it. I don't see it at the beginning of the run. I don't see it at the end of the run. And so it's interesting to get that feedback, and it's really positive reinforcement. I myself sometimes can feel like maybe my body's fighting me, and
mm,
sometimes I don't know whether to trust it or not. Like, something
mhm,
might feel funny, but just because it feels funny doesn't mean it's wrong. And so
mhm,
I've often had to have someone or my husband like, hey, will you record me so I can see this? Because maybe it feels funny, and then he'll record it and it looks
mm,
perfect. And so I've just
mm,
had to realize, like, my brain might be telling me something because it feels different, but just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. So
mhm,
I think I still have that um, brain body component that I'm still fighting and working through of, do I trust my body and where my foot is in space? But I haven't tripped since I've been back while I'm walking. I haven't had any scuffing or anything while I'm running. I have moments where I feel like maybe my leg's a little bit off, and I know some things that I can do to kind of like reinforce correct behavior in the moment. So I feel like I'm really improved. I
mhm,
think it'll be a good test when I start adding speed in the spring, but I feel like I've made so much progress to the point where people don't realize that I have dystonia.
mhm. Yeah. I was watching your videos. I was like, I don't see it. I don't see it. But I can remember when we were doing training, you were like, it
Yeah.
feels weird. And we were kind of like, that's good.
Yeah.
Like, let it
Right.
feel weird. I think the weird is actually part of the kind of reprogramming,
Yeah.
so to speak. And someone is saying, thank you for this. Very informative and gives me hope. And I think that was a really big reason. I know we talked about this too, Bree, of just giving hope
Yeah.
to folks with dystonia, because there are a lot of messages out there that there isn't hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of groups and people and feedback that's saying there's really nothing you can do. And I think it's really important that people try, and try different things and work with people who are willing to be creative. And I think you have to do something you've never done to be able to see the results that you want to see.
Yeah, that, as somebody else said, this is very encouraging for the rest of us. Yeah, and it's a good point. I think some of the like traditional approaches to dystonia, which might be strengthening things or stretching things, that it doesn't really get to the heart
Right.
of the issue.
Yep.
And so just like you said, doing something different.
Yep.
You've got some major fans on here. You're an inspiration, Bree. They said, including myself, I'm such a fan, and I really cannot wait to see you increasing mileage. And do you have a race that you're training for?
I haven't signed up for a race yet. My three goals for, doing this program was one, to be able to walk without tripping, two, to be able to run again, and three, to be able to race again. So I feel like I've checked the first two boxes,
Yeah.
and the third one, we'll see how speed comes back as we enter the spring. But you will probably find me in a few half marathons this spring and summer, and a marathon if things are still feeling good.
Yay. Exciting. Super exciting. And what, it, as I work with a lot of people with dystonia, it has a huge impact on your entire life and family. And so outside of running and walking, what do you feel has changed?
Well, I feel like I have part of who I am back again. And my husband will say I'm a better wife, I'm a better mom, I'm a better human when I get to run. And call it selfish or not, it's what I need to be the best version of myself. It's not who I am, but it's a part of who I am and what I feel like I was created to do. And so to be able to have that back feels like I'm whole again, and it just gives me, like, when I have that time to fill my cup, and to be able to do that, I'm able to better love others and take care of my family better. And so I when I wasn't running, I was dealing with this, I was kind of a shell of
Mm,
who I am now, and so I'm just grateful to be able to have that back again.
yeah. Yeah, I can really relate to that. We have to take care and be able to fill our own cups to be there for our families. Now, a very specific thing that somebody is asking is about the sensory component. And do you actually wear an elastic at your ankle when you run, Bree? Or
I
do
don't
you
wear
use anything
I don't
sensory
wear
wise when you're
anything
running?
when I run. No,
Okay.
I just use the bands for exercises before I
Okay.
run.
That's what I thought as well. When we were doing training, we used all kinds of things while you
Yeah.
were running.
Yeah.
A lot of different weights and sensory inputs and all of those things, really to try to, if you kind of imagine the map in your brain of having an image of your leg in it and an image of that movement, we were trying to retrain that map. It had
Yeah.
definitely been smudged and was inaccurate, and you couldn't feel your leg well. So that is where, as this person, Mo, is asking about, we use those during training, but it's not necessarily that you need them forever.
Right.
Um, and so at this point, you don't,
Right.
which which is great. And I'm guessing too, as you've been training more, what is variability like for you in your training, like in your runs? What are you doing to stay variable?
Um, so I rotate shoes. I have three different types of shoes that I use. So I keep that variability. I also incorporate usually one day of hills, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
outside or on the treadmill, and not just uphill, but kind of going the up and down so that I have that variability. I've tried different uh, drops in shoes, like different
Mm-hmm.
millimeters of drops, to see if that changes things for me. And then just variability in the workouts that I'm doing. So I tend to do longer mileage each day, but varying what I'm doing. So making sure I have really easy days. And then if I have speed days, making sure that I have the recovery in between, but trying to make it look a little bit different each day.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I think you just gave so many lessons right there on how a runner could be variable, but that's one of the pieces that that could actually drive dystonia is a lack of variability,
Yeah.
and that's not the case for everybody. But when we think of sensory inputs, even where you run in the street,
Yeah.
is it like if you're always in the same place, or like me, I'm a creature of habit. I always run like the same pathway in my neighborhood if
Yeah.
I'm outside, and having variability in that actually changes the sensory experience.
Yep.
Um, and so now that's just kind of a part of your running life is the variability, which is
Yep.
awesome. Which is awesome. Now, the for you, Bree, somebody else is asking if the dystonia pattern was similar with shoes or barefoot.
So I didn't try running barefoot, but I still had the weird kind of flipper foot even when I was barefoot too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
it
I
was
think
like
this
a
is
repetitive movement pattern. It didn't really matter what I was wearing.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and we have folks try all kinds of things, different insoles and this and that. They've bought all kinds of gadgets for their feet and shoes, because sometimes it just feels like it's a
Yeah.
footwear issue,
Yeah.
even. Um, and it's not exactly a footwear issue. It's it's a feedback issue and a feedback loop, from the brain. But we do find that some people, it can vary based on what they wear, if they're barefoot or not, and things like
Yeah,
that.
I remember early on, before I came out to reactive, when I wore flip-flops, that was very hard for me. And I don't know if it was that I
Mm,
didn't have like the security of something behind my heel or something kind of holding my
mm,
heel, but I felt like I was the most trippy in flip-flops, because I didn't have that security behind me.
mm.
Um, and so that was something that I knew I just couldn't wear flip-flops for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Are you back to flip flops?
I'm
Well,
back to, well, not right now because it's cold, but
it's
yes,
not
I'm
flip
back
flop
to
weather.
flip flops are in my future.
Awesome, awesome. Um, Now, yeah, somebody else said, I feel like I walk better with Crocs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes having that really different sensory input of
Yeah.
a shoe is better. Although I don't recommend running in Crocs,
Yeah.
but it might be part of your rehab is to alter that and change it
Yeah.
more frequently. I do that too. I use this as an excuse to buy more running
Right.
shoes, I believe.
I
I,
used it as an excuse to buy indoor shoes and outdoor shoes and three of each kind.
and some little weights and some bands, and
I blamed it on my therapy journey.
just blame it on us. Blame it on us. Now, one of the questions I like to ask here as we kind of wrap up, is your advice for other clinicians. So we have a lot of clinicians that learn through reactive, and they're that's how I met Kristen when she
Yeah.
reached out. What would you tell another clinician about therapy for dystonia, or even just understanding a person with runner's dystonia?
I think the biggest thing for me is make it fun, because the dystonia journey is so depressing. I think most runners who are going through this feel like a part of them has died. And I know that's how a lot of us explain it, and it sounds dramatic, but it feels like this deep sense of loss or grief over a part of yourself. And so, any way you can make therapy fun, laughing at me, laughing with me, making me laugh. Like that was a really healing part of the journey for me. And then also, I think just really listening and acknowledging that it's real. None of us go into this because we want to stop running or want to have all of this attention, but to acknowledge that something's happening and it's really frustrating when your body doesn't do what you think it should be
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Oh, good messages. Fun and listening might
Yes.
be like my two favorite things
Yeah.
anyway. And then lastly, what would you say? Somebody actually reached out like on this comment. how do we work with reactive? I live in Massachusetts. So I will say Bree had to come to us. We
Yeah.
couldn't do this online. The way the licenses work in the States is you have to be licensed in the state that the person is in, and we don't have our Minnesota license. So, um, so for folks that want to work with us that are in the US, they can come and hang out with us in California. It's really lovely, actually.
Yes.
Running on the beach that
Yes.
morning, we went on an early morning. It was like such a highlight.
And we saw dolphins.
And we saw dolphins. It was incredible. It was incredible. So you do have to come out to California. I will say, because the laws are different internationally, we are able to work with people on Zoom internationally. But what would you share for somebody that was maybe on the fence about making this leap? It's a pretty big commitment of time and effort and money, like all of those pieces. What would you say for somebody on the fence?
I think there's really something powerful about being taken out of your environment and being
Mhm.
put in a different environment where you are removed from some of those stressors, from that some of that responsibility. As much as it was stressful to leave my family, to not have that responsibility to really focus on my healing, that was really powerful. To be able to set aside work for a period of time, that was really powerful. And so just being able to step into this peaceful beach community and really just focus on what I needed to do to improve was so worth it for me. It was great for my mind, for my heart, for my soul. I just had chance to slow down in a way that I've never been able to do before.
Mm.
It was like a maternity leave without the baby.
Oh my gosh. That that I never thought about it like that. But I will say, so that I agree, like getting away is so helpful. One of the biggest things that we work on is getting this to also be helpful in your home environment,
Yeah.
right? And so how was that transition and how has that been? Because I think some people can be like, well, great, you do so well while you're at the beach and at this great place, but then you go home and you're back to, you just bought a house and like your family is there. I know you've gotten to keep progressing, but how was that transition?
I thought the team, first of all, my kids were so happy to have me back permanently, but I think the team did such a good job of creating activities that we could incorporate my family into. So, one of the things was monitoring my heart rate variability. And one of the things that we found really improved that was blowing bubbles. And I have three kids, and who doesn't like blowing bubbles, And so being able to say, oh, we can blow bubbles together, and this is therapy for mom, or being able to have almost like noodle sword fights with pool noodles. Like, what kid or adult doesn't think that's fun? And so there were just a lot of things that were a part of the program that my kids could do that feels like we're playing games together, and they don't even fully realize that it's a benefit to me. And then my husband can get involved with some of the band work, with using the bigger bands like behind him and
Mhm.
his weight, and being a resistance for me. And so it's really been something that, everyone can get involved in and not even realize that it's therapy for
Mhm.
me.
I remember running with you with that band on.
Yeah.
I was sore for like 2 days after, and I was like, "This is going to be great for your husband. He's going to
Yeah.
run.
Yeah.
You're in front. He's got the band on." That's awesome. And you were with us for 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else had asked that question.
Yes.
So,
4 weeks.
so it was 4 weeks, and it was about 3 sessions a day, probably 10 sessions a week, maybe. Bree?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
2 to 3 sessions a week, or two
Yeah.
to three sessions a
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. So it's intense, but it's also like you said, like you started running again
Yeah.
and you didn't have a car, so you ran everywhere.
Yeah. Or walked. Yeah.
Or walked. And so we tend to kind of suggest other activities through the day, but it's a full time
Hmm.
commitment when
Yeah.
you're in it. Yeah.
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 I feel like I maybe could have found time to work if I had wanted
Hmm.
to, for people who need to be able to do that. But for me, I had the opportunity to really step away and really fully immerse myself into the process. And so it really was short-term disability for me. And that was really, really worth it to just be able to focus on my healing and not have to worry about also doing my job.
Yeah. 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 And we have had people work full time
Yeah.
while they're out. Either they can work remotely if they're
Yeah.
from out of state, or otherwise able to work. But the fact that it worked for you to be able to
Yeah.
not work also, it sounds like that was also a helpful part of
Yeah.
your process and
Very
healing.
much so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Bree, I also just like want you to come back, not for therapy,
I
just
know.
for fun.
I want to come back too.
We just had such a good time, and I so enjoyed being with you and with your team, and just seeing your progress and continuing to be able to cheer you on.
Thank you. I had a
As
blast. I'm so
as
grateful.
Beth says, keep going, Bree. Beth is here, I think, just after
Okay.
you, Bree. And so I feel like we have this little community of folks just
Yeah.
cheering each other on.
That's awesome.
Somebody else asked, is heart rate variability common? And this is something that we look at from the autonomic standpoint, is the heart rate variability piece. And is that something that you're still using as a measurement,
Um,
Bree?
I use it more. I monitor my heart rate variability overnight. So I
Okay.
just use my Garmin to find out. It gives me a little bit of like, how do things look when I sleep, and am I getting good rest as well?
Yeah.
And am I in the zone that I think I should be in? So that's where I mostly watch for it. Of um, really guarding my sleep and making sure that those numbers look good
Hmm.
overnight.
Yeah. I think that's one of the nice things with some of those newer ones like the Garmin and the Whoop,
Yeah.
that they'll give you some of those stats for recovery.
Yep.
And that with heart rate variability is kind of a direct look at that autonomic nervous system
Yeah.
recovery. So
Yeah.
that that is helpful. Well, Bree, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your story for so many people. And I think a lot of people learned, a lot of clinicians learned. We'll share this. We'll save this video, so it'll be saved on our page. But I put it out in our newsletter as well, so you'll keep educating other people for many years to come, Bree. And we can't wait to keep hearing about what's next for you
Thank
too.
you. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you, and have a good night.
Thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.